Preface. Why should you read this book? Web API development is exploding. Companies are investing in droves to build systems that can be consumed by a range of clients over the web. Think of your favorite website, and most likely there's an API to talk to it. Creating an API that can talk over HTTP is very easy. The challenge comes after you deploy the first version. It turns out that the creators of HTTP thought a lot about this and how to design for evolvability. Both media types and hypermedia were central to the design for this reason. But many API authors don't think or take advantage of this. Deploying APIs that introduce a lot of coupling in the client and that don't utilize HTTP as they should. This makes it very difficult to evolve the API without breaking the client. Why does this happen? Often because this is the easiest and most intuitive path from an engineering standpoint to get things done. However, it is counterintuitive in the long term and against the fundamental principles with which the web itself was designed. This is a book for people who want to design APIs that can adapt to change over time. Change is inevitable. The API you build today will evolve. Thus, the question is not if, it is how. The decisions or non-decisions you make early on can drastically influence the answer. Will adding a new feature break your existing clients, forcing them to be upgraded and redeployed, or can your existing clients continue to operate? How will you secure your API? Will you be able to leverage newer security protocols? Will your API be able to scale to meet the demands of your users, or will you have to re-architect? Will you be able to support newer clients and devices as they appear? These are the kinds of questions that you can design around. At first glance you might think this sounds like big design up front or a waterfall approach, but that is not at all the case. This is not about designing the entire system before it is built. It is not a recipe for analysis paralysis. There are definitely decisions that you must make up front, but they are higher level and relate to the overall design. They do not require you to understand or predict every aspect of the system. Rather, these decisions lay a foundation that can evolve in an iterative fashion. As you then build the system out, there are various approaches you can take that build on top of that foundation in order to continually reinforce your goal. This is a book of application more than theory. Our desire is for you to walk away with the tools to be able to build a real, evolvable system. To get you there, we'll start by covering some essentials of the web and web API development. Then we'll take you through the creation of a new API using ASP.NET Web API. From its design through implementation. The implementation will cover important topics like how to implement hypermedia with ASP.NET Web API and how to perform content negotiation. We'll show you how to actually evolve it once it is deployed. We'll also show how you can incorporate established practices like acceptance testing and test-driven development and techniques such as inversion of control to achieve a more maintainable code base. Finally, we'll take you through the internals of Web API to give you a deep understanding that will help you better leverage it for building evolvable systems. What do you need to know to follow along? To get the most out of this book in its entirety, you should be a developer who is experienced with developing C applications with .NET version 3.5 or greater. You should ideally also have some experience building web APIs. Which framework you have used to develop those APIs is not important. What is important is having familiarity with the concepts. It is not necessary to have any prior experience with ASP.NET Web API or ASP.NET, though familiarity with ASP.NET MVC will definitely help. If you are not a .NET developer, then there is something here for you. One specific goal in authoring this book was for a significant portion of the content to be centered on API design and development in general and not tied to ASP.NET Web API. For that reason, we think you will find that regardless of your development stack Java, Ruby, PHP, Node, etc., much of the content in the first two sections of the book will be valuable to you in learning API development. The Hitchhiker's Guide to Navigating this book before you begin your journey. Here is a guide to help you navigate the book's contents. Part I is focused on helping you get oriented around web API development. It covers the foundations of the web/HTTP and API development, and introduces you to ASP.NET Web API. If you are new to Web API development/ASP.NET Web API, this is a great place to start. If you've been using ASP.NET Web API or another Web API stack but would like to learn more about how to take advantage of HTTP, this is also a good starting point. Part 2 centers on Web API development in the real world. It takes you through a real-world app from design through implementation, covering the client and server. If you are comfortable with Web API development and in a hurry to start building an app, jump right to the second section. Part 3 is a fairly comprehensive reference on exactly how the different parts of ASP.NET Web API work under the hood. It also covers more advanced topics like security and testability. If you are already building an app with ASP.NET Web API and trying to figure out how to best utilize Web API itself, start here. Next, we'll give a quick overview of what you will find in each chapter. Part I, Fundamentals Chapter 1, The Internet, the World Wide Web, and HTTP. This chapter starts with a bit of history about the World Wide Web and HTTP. It then gives you a 5,000 foot view of HTTP. You can think of it as a dummy's guide to HTTP, giving you the essentials you need to know, without your having to read the entire spec. Chapter 2, Web APIs. This chapter begins by giving a historical context on Web API development in general. The remainder of the chapter discusses essentials of API development, starting with core concepts and then diving into different styles and approaches for designing APIs. Chapter 3, ASP.NET Web API 101. This chapter discusses the fundamental drivers behind ASP.NET Web API as a framework. It will then introduce you to the basics of ASP.NET Web API as well as the .NET HTTP programming model and client. Chapter 4, Processing Architecture. This chapter will describe at a high level the life cycle of a request as it travels through ASP.NET Web API. You will learn about each of the different actors who have a part in processing different aspects of the HTTP request and response. Part 2, Real-World API Development. Chapter 5, The Application, and Chapter 6, Media Type Selection and Design. These chapters discuss the overall design for the issue tracker application. They cover several important design-related topics including media type selection and design, as well as hypermedia. Chapter 7, Building the API, and Chapter 8, Improving the API. These chapters will show how to actually implement and enhance the hypermedia-driven issue tracker API using ASP.NET Web API. They introduce you to how to develop the API using a behavior-driven development style. Chapter 9, Building the Client. This chapter focuses entirely on how to build out a hypermedia client, which can consume the issue tracker API. Part 3, Web API Nuts and Bolts. Chapter 10, The HTTP Programming Model. This chapter will cover in depth the new .NET HTTP programming model on which ASP.NET Web API rests entirely. Chapter 11, Hosting. This chapter covers all the different hosting models that exist for ASP.NET Web API, including self-host, IIS, and the new OWN model. Chapter 12, Controllers and Routing. In this chapter you will take a deep dive into how Web API routing works and how controllers operate. Chapter 13, Formatters and Model Binding, and Chapter 14, HTTP Client. These chapters cover everything you need to know about model binding and about using the new HTTP client. Chapter 15. Security in Chapter 16. The OAuth 2.0 Authorization Framework. These chapters cover the overall security model in ASP.NET Web API and then talk in detail about how to implement OAuth in your API. Chapter 17. Testability. This chapter will cover how to develop an ASP.NET Web API in a test-driven manner. Conventions used in this book. The following typographical conventions are used in this book. Italic indicates new terms, URLs, email addresses, file names, and file extensions. Constant width used for program listings, as well as within paragraphs to refer to program elements such as variable or function names, databases, data types, environment variables, statements, and keywords. Constant width bold shows commands or other text that should be typed literally by the user. Constant width italic shows text that should be replaced with user-supplied values or by values deter. Mind by context. This element signifies a tip or suggestion. This element signifies a general note. This element indicates a warning or caution. Using code examples, supplemental material, code examples, exercises, etc. is available for download at https://github.com/webapibook. A forum for discussion of the book is located at http://bit.ly/web-api-forum. This book is here to help you get your job done. In general, if example code is offered with this book, you may use it in your programs and documentation. You do not need to contact us for permission unless you're reproducing a significant portion of the code. For example, writing a program that uses several chunks of code from this book does not require permission. Selling or distributing a CD-ROM of examples from O'Reilly Books does require permission. Answering a question by citing this book and quoting example code does not require permission. Incorporating a significant amount of ample code from this book into your product's documentation does require permission. We appreciate, but do not require, attribution. An attribution usually includes the title, author, publisher, and ISBN. For example, Designing Evolvable Web APIs with ASP.NET by Glenn Block, Pablo Sobrero, Pedro Felix, Howard Deerking, and Daryl Miller O'Reilly. Copyright 2012 Glenn Block, Pablo Sobrero, Pedro Felix, Howard Deerking, and Daryl Miller. 978-1-449-33771-1. If you feel your use of code examples falls outside fair use or the permission given above, feel free to contact us at permissionsreally.com. Safari registered trademark Books Online. Safari Books Online is an on-demand digital library that delivers expert content in both book and video form from the world's leading authors in technology and business. Technology professionals, software developers, web designers, and business in Korea. TIP professionals use Safari Books Online as their primary resource for research, problem solving, learning, and certification training. Safari Books Online offers a range of product mixes and pricing programs for organizations, government agencies, and individuals. Subscribers have access to thousands of books, training videos, and pre-publication manuscripts in one fully searchable database from publishers like O'Reilly Media, Prentice Hall Professional, Addison Wesley Pro, Professional, Microsoft Press, Sans, K, Peach Pit Press, Focal Press, Cisco Press, John Wiley Sons, Singress, Morgan Kaufman, IBM Redbooks, Pact, Adobe Press, FT Press, Press, many. New writers, McGraw-Hill, Jones Bartlett, Course Technol, Ogie, and dozens more. For more information about Safari Books Online, please visit us online. How to contact us? Please address comments and questions concerning this book to the publisher. O'Reilly Media, Inc. 1005 Gravenstein Highway, North Sebastopol, California, 95472 800 998 9938 in the United States or Canada.